yet. Now that you're retired,
So
you'll have time.
Ted isn't too committive to dates there, right?
Well, I want to address the electrification first.
No, but dates to me.
Yeah, I know that. And just between you and me, 827,000 is way out of line. That would equate to, I know what they charge for their design work. I've talked to the colleagues that I have.
Seems high.
And what they do in that is they actually go out and start negotiating all the, the agreements to get right away and all of that. We're not there yet. So
It seems high.
All right. Okay, everybody, 10 o'clock. We have a quorum. I'll call Electoral Area Service Committee of Wednesday, October the 9th, 2024 to order. And the first order of business will be the chair will acknowledge that we're located in the traditional territory of the Lashwitach people and the adoption of the public agenda, please.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the agenda? Nothing to add? All those in favor? And that is carried. Petition delegation, Natural Asset Management, Roy Brook, Executive Director of Natural Assets Initiatives, is going to make a presentation. You have 10 minutes, and then we'll take the opportunity to ask you some questions. All righty. Roy here?
I'm right
Not
here. Can you hear me?
oh, he's online.
I thought.
Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Roy.
Terrific.
Roy, would you like us to pull your presentation up or will you pull it up?
Might be easier if you do. It'll just save me fiddling around. And if you can, I'll just ask you to advance.
Perfect. I'll do that right now.
I always have trouble with Teams. If you could skip to the next slide, I'll just maybe start from there. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me here. My name is Roy Brook. I'm the executive director of a not-for-profit called the Natural Assets Initiative. Couple of thoughts before I go any further. First is to say that I will be in Strathcona this weekend, staying at the lodge there on the lake with my family and my brother's family. I know that part of the world pretty well and love it. Second thing is, so we were asked to do this presentation, so it's really your dime, and I'm at your disposal for how, for any questions you may have. Having said that, I've got a brief presentation here. I'll run through it to kind of explain what natural assets is, natural asset management is, why you may care, and then talk about a few ways that you could consider for getting started. So if that's okay, I'll dive straight into it. Okay, well, so hearing no objections, the main idea that I want to convey is this. Nature, natural assets provide a wide variety of services on which, or benefits, you could think of them as, on which all of us rely. So that's sort of point one. And point two, natural asset management, which is based on systems that all of you have to adopt anyway, is a process by which you can really center thinking about nature and thinking about the values and the services of nature in your decision making. And I'll talk about some of the reasons why this may be important. But as you can see here on the screen, a key point here is that some of the services that nature provides are sort of infrastructure related. So things that you are responsible for anyway. Some are non-infrastructure related, but they're the things that make your communities worth living in. Unlike engineered assets, nature has no end of useful life. It typically has no capital costs and doesn't provide a single benefit, typically provides a multiplicity of benefits. So if we skip to the next slide, and I'm going to hustle through this just in view of the time. As a very quick example, I took that picture in Whistler, but it could be anywhere. Let's think of a wetland. By virtue of storing water, it can be contributing to infrastructure services like drinking water filtration, stormwater management, flood risk reduction, aquifer recharge. that same wetland will store carbon. It might provide recreational or social amenities as other examples. Typically, however, most of us and most entities don't really think about nature in this way. To the extent that we're thinking about it at all, we're thinking about it quite narrowly as a green or a recreational or a social amenity. And practically, that means that every hour of every day there's land use, zoning, investment, capital, wide range of decisions that are going on with, at best, a very narrow, very rudimentary understanding of the services we're getting from nature, the impacts of those decisions, of our decisions on nature, and in effect, we're putting a value of 0 on nature in not all, but most of our decisions. Why does this matter? Well, there's a bunch of reasons, and it depends on one's perspective a little bit, but where I live, the entire city's being dug up. I mean, you can't get anywhere in Victoria right now. And the point is that our engineered assets are aging. Many of them were built 40, 50, 60 years ago, before asset management in its modern incarnation was a thing. At the same time, we have a disrupted climate putting more pressure on those assets. At the same time, we also have not inexhaustible tax bases. So we have to deliver services differently in a changing climate in view of the fact that existing engineered stocks are aging, need replacement, need upgrading, and so on. So if you have in your jurisdiction natural assets that can provide services that you rely on anyway, or that provide services that you need, then it's pretty much a smart, no regrets play, in my view, to understand what are the services that they are providing, what condition are those assets in, what risks do they face, basic information like this, and then to start interweaving it into your decision making. So if you skip to the next slide, I think I've covered most of this already. But the point that maybe another example of the urgency, and you can hit the QR code to find the underlying report. There's other pressures too, we all need to build more housing quickly. But as we build housing, and this document makes this case, it's important not to erode the very natural assets that are going to help keep those houses and that housing stock cost-effective and resilient and flood-free over their lifetimes. So finally, by taking a run at natural asset management, you can strengthen your decision-making. Your worst-case scenario is taking kind of a more holistic, more informed decision. You can maximize some of your existing infrastructure spend. I don't know if I'd use the word avoid risk, but maybe you can reduce risks and the consequences of removing existing natural features in a more kind of deliberate way. Next slide. So the only point I would make here is that what's really making all of this possible, and more than kind of an interesting bumper sticker or sound bite, is that all public entities in Canada must adopt modern structured asset management. And this work that I'm talking about bolts right into standard asset management processes, which in turn means that, I'm not showing up and saying, hey, folks, I've got a new thing for all of you to worry about. We're simply saying, look, you have to do asset management anyway. You may as well do it thoroughly. And that involves considering nature. I don't have time to go into all the ins and outs of it, but I can certainly do that in the questions. Looking at the map on the right, we've gone from a single example of people really doing natural asset management in its modern incarnation, a single example, to ballpark 160 now across Canada, They're all at different stages of this asset management wheel. And there's practical tools. Maybe I'll leave it there. Next slide. I will say there's lots of practical examples. A very obvious one here is in Grand Forks. They had back-to-back flooding emergencies. Together with us, we looked at some of the services that the floodplain was providing. To make a long story short, they got $54 million from the feds. They did some engineered works. They did some natural asset rehabilitation, restoration. This year, it turns out that they didn't have a flooding catastrophe, which was the good news. And they also figured out that 500 fewer people would have been at risk as a result of the things they put into place, including the natural asset stuff. So there's real cost savings associated with this. And there's a full write-up on this on our website. Next slide. A very simple, easy starting point is our inventories, which really help you understand, what do I have? What condition is it in? What risks did they face? If you hit that QR code, you'll see what Saanich on the island has just finished up. Next slide. I won't have time to go into this, but Selkirk, Manitoba, small community northeast of Winnipeg, done some really exciting stuff and baked this in, not big cost items, but have really baked it in and found a lot of interesting cost savings. Another great example. Next slide. Lots of barriers to this work. I'm not pretending it's a shoe-in. But I will say the province of BC is kind of seized with working on these barriers. We can talk about this report we did for them later on if there's interest, but don't let the barriers stop you, I guess would be my key message. Next slide. We are busy creating rules for the game. We're not just working on the ground, so I'll just quickly note that there's now some professional norms for engineers. There's lots of work, for example, related to accounting principles. And there's even a national standard for the inventories that I just mentioned. So there's this whole market is becoming more sophisticated. And that's what's needed to make it a broadly based practice. Next slide. I would say if any of you are interested, if any of this resonates, maybe bear the following in mind. There's no right place to start, but we do these very simple, low-cost, low-barrier, high-yield roadmaps that just help get the thinking going. Very hard to get much further in your journey without an inventory. And really the point is to keep making progress wherever you happen to be. And make no mistake, no one's doing this stuff perfectly. If you hit that QR code, you'll find out a bit of information on the roadmaps. It's like a really dead easy, takes a couple of days to run through a roadmap and get people thinking about this. Next slide, please. There's a few funding windows. Your LGCAP money that you've got from the province is, I don't know how much you've got, but it's explicitly open to being used for this kind of work. There's definitely some upcoming FCM money, so I'd watch that space in November. We're tracking it and can certainly send out information if someone wants to send me their email. Next slide. So conclusion, wherever you start, whether it's saving money, whether it's adaptation, nature, service delivery, nature probably is going to help you get where you want to go. And natural asset management is no silver bullet, but it's an increasingly sort of well-articulated and disciplined place to start. Of 177 local governments in BC, there's roughly 27 or so that are at least taking some action. And as I've laid out, there's a few fairly innocuous and easy starting points. If any of this resonates, we'd be happy to have a longer discussion. Thank you.
Any questions from directors? Bertram Winnie, you got a question?
I do. Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Roy, for that presentation. I have a couple of questions, and one of them is you were talking about the roadmap, it's low cost and low barrier. And when you said low cost, is that something that the agency that you work for provides, or is that just done in-house?
So the funding, so we've recently we had a big subsidy for all of this. Intact Public Entities was basically, the insurance group was subsidizing this. So if you're insured by Intact Public Entities, it was free. If you're not insured by them, it was still subsidized, but it cost $750. We've ripped through all that money. We're figuring out what it would cost us to deliver them. It's still only going to be, $1,500, a couple of grand a pop to do them. If that kind of money is a problem, then I would definitely look, as I say, at your LG cap or FCM money, which can definitely cover those kinds of expenses. Does that answer that? Was that answering the question?
So I think somewhat, yeah. May I ask another question, Chair?
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm interested in natural asset inventories, and I have sort of a two-part question. I'm curious which natural assets you would recommend being included in a rural asset management inventory, and I'm also curious if you have any examples or names of any jurisdictions or municipalities that are working on an aquifer inventory.
Definitely. So to kind of take the question in reverse, so the community that I know that's done the most related to their aquifer is the town of Gibsons, and they've actually, and what's kind of neat there is they've by the time a drop of water gets into their aquifer, it's gone through 7 other jurisdictions. And so they've really had to look at this pretty holistically. So that's a good starting point. And they've done aquifer studies, and it's really been sort of a foundational piece of a lot of their work. City of Grand Forks, it was kind of their starting point until they had these flooding emergencies. They had high porous aquifer. They had to close down a couple of wellheads because it had some gas leaking into it. They've done some work. I can certainly drum up others for you. But there's no shortage of evidence and experience there, and we can help sort of do some matchmaking. In terms of what assets you have, typically, I mean, we can sort of cut the suit to fit the cloth, but typically what we would do is look at a jurisdiction. So we would look at, and it could be your regional district boundaries, it could be a watershed within it. We can do it in any way you like. And then we would, in GIS, it's a GIS-based thing, so it's all geospatial information. We'd start defining assets within them, and there's ways to define it so it's sort of unbroken areas of land, that aren't bisected by roads. We would start defining categories of assets, and it kind of depends what's relevant to you, but it's going to include forests, it's going to include wetlands, it's going to include foreshores, it's going to include riparian areas. It really depends what's relevant in the context, and we can go into more or less detail. The inventories aren't static. What we would do, or anyone else who does it for you using the national standard as a guideline, there would be a starting point. We'd define some boundaries to it. We'd say, these are your natural assets. We'd do a desktop condition assessment. We would do a risk identification. So at the end of it, and I can send you some links so you can walk through other people's dashboards, but then it's a living thing. So you might say, okay, we've got this dashboard for all of Strathcona region, but you know what? What we've been able to see is that there's some particular risks for flooding or drought or whatever it may be in this area or in that area, and we want to go deeper. And Regional District of Nanaimo, for example, is going deeper. on some areas they know to be of particular risk. And, that stuff's a little bit early days, but we'll have it written up in the next probably 4 weeks, and I'd be happy to send that along too.
Okay, thank you. I would be interested to see that work that the Nanaimo Regional District is doing.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Very welcome.
Dinesh has a question?
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for staff. The LGC CAP funds that we receive, can you share how much we receive and what those are currently being used for?
I can't remember what the acronym is for, but I
Government
think.
Climate Action.
Yeah, they've changed it several times, but I believe because most of the funds is generated or historically has been generated from the gardens, it has been returned back to the gardens. We do a report every year, do we not, Mike, to get the board to approve the allocation. I think we're at somewhere 80, 100 grand, is that?
Yeah, it was about 88.
Yeah.
Around there.
So I think the parameters have changed a bit for what we have to use it for, but we bring it forward to the board every year that we get it and get the board to support options for where it's allocated. But I think historically, correct me if I'm wrong, it's gone to the gardens. I think some of it might have been allocated for a project at the admin building this year.
Yeah, that's correct. So in the past, it was based on the carbon tax on the bills. The gardens is a high usage of natural gas, so they incurred most of the expense and it was returned to them. Now it's a population-based and everything else. So I believe it's 86 or 88 a year. So the first allocation we've put into the corporate admin for the envelope, for the building envelope, and then that'll be reducing energy usage here at the office to benefit the region.
Great, thanks. I'm trying to figure out a way for, raise a couple grand to get this roadmap and do some asset inventory. Wondering if there's, if there is $2,000 we can pull from somewhere to get this done, or whether I should make a motion for, staff to apply for the FCM funding that's coming up.
Well, we can certainly make a motion for the funding to keep it on our radar. And I think for when we get into financial planning, keep it on the radar for next year. Again, the allocation comes annually for that greenhouse emission fund. And if there's something that we want to partition it out to, absolutely just make a motion, and when it comes due, we can bring that forward. It sounds like we're not talking a lot of money, a couple grand maybe an area. So that sounds fine.
Okay, great.
There's generally limited things we allocate that fund for, based on the requirements. That's why it's traditionally gone back to the gardens, because they're a heavy user and an easy place to allocate it to with all the things they're doing here. And we had a project for energy efficiency at the office, so we allocated some of the money there. But there's not a whole lot of spots other than the gardens to allocate it to, but certainly at financial planning, bring it up, make a motion at one of our meetings, and we can put it in the financial plan.
Okay, will do, thanks. And Chair, I'll make a motion on after
All
we
right,
receive the report.
first we'll receive the report after we're finished with the presentation, and then you can make your subsequent motion. Anything further, Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you for the presentation. There was some of the slides that resonated with me, so that was interesting. Neat touch with the QR codes, made the report a little bit easier to read and things like that. I'm certainly interested in touching base, so I will be asking staff for your contact, and I would like to have a discussion at some point outside of this meeting, so thank you.
You're very welcome. If it's my contact information is in the presentation, what may be helpful is to do a broader briefing, more informal, with staff and councillors if interested. Take an hour and walk through this in a little bit more detail and talk about where some of the different activities like roadmaps and inventories, what they'll get you and what they won't.
Just
Anything further?
Just to follow up, that's exactly what I was looking for, so thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Director Mooney?
Chair, I am really interested in the idea of having a more broad conversation, as Roy Brooks was saying, with maybe a little bit more like informal and Q&A. So I'm not sure if that would be best suited for a motion to to have that happen at this committee table versus the board. I'm curious if staff have thoughts on that?
Everything we do here will go to the board anyway, so might as well start here. And we'll do it after the presentation's concluded. You
Okay,
can make a motion.
and would we want that conversation to be here at the committee? Yes, probably, yeah, okay.
Anything further? Seeing none, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the committee, Roy, for your presentation this morning.
You're very welcome. Thanks for the opportunity. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye now.
Motion to receive. Motion to receive.
Oh, yes, we need a motion to receive the presentation.
Move receipt?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All in favor of receipt? That's unanimous. That's carried. And subsequent motion, Director Vanesh.
I'd like to move that staff put the FCM funding on their radar to apply to be able to move forward with some of this work.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, carried. And Director Mawhinney.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that we schedule a further, more in-depth conversation around natural asset management and invite Roy Brooks to participate
For EASC.
at Electoral Area Services Committee.
Did we get a seconder on that?
Second.
Thank
Just-
you. Director Rice?
Just a question. I mean, what I heard was that that could be about a 1-hour presentation. And it sounded like it was more geared to the individuals themselves. So I don't know how you would accomplish that all in one meeting. So I would prefer to actually see a motion where, I think each of the electoral areas deserve their time, and 1 hour sounds like a fairly appropriate presentation for each of the electoral areas that are interested.
That's fine. If that's the route you want to go, I might just suggest that we schedule meetings with Roy's group and the individual EA director. I don't know if we have to have an EASC meeting on it, if it's just, for
I would agree. I don't think we need to have an EASC meeting, so.
Well, I felt like there was probably a lot more information that we could all gather as individual directors on and maybe it's not going to satisfy the specific needs that you have, Director Rice, but I do feel like there's probably a fair amount of overview information that would be applicable to each of our electoral areas that we could all learn at the same time, which would use Roy Brooks' time wisely.
Director Vanesh, are you?
I'm hearing what Director Rice says, wondering if we could find a middle ground here. I think the other important thing is that staff are there as well. So perhaps, wondering if Director Mawhinney would be willing to amend a motion to have staff create individual meetings that staff can attend to as well outside of an official EASC meeting.
If that's fine. I think maybe would it be better to have a motion that we're asking staff to investigate and set up a meeting as appropriate, or?
So did you want to amend the motion or withdraw it and make another one?
I can withdraw it and make a
All right,
different
the
one.
seconder is happy with that? All right, and what's the motion you're going to put forward?
Go ahead, Director Vanesh.
I'll move that staff work with the presenter to set up individual meetings for the electoral area directors that have relevant staff included as well.
I'll second that.
All right, anything further? On the question, all those in favor? And those opposed? No one's opposed, so that's carried. All right, moving right along here, we're on adoption of the previous meeting minutes for adoption, please.
Move adoption.
May I,
Can
Chair?
we get a seconder?
Oh, I'll second.
Thank you.
And
Director Mawhinney?
There's an item called the Brewster Wind Project under correspondence, and it should read the BC Speleological Society, not the Geological Society. So I would move that we accept the minutes as amended.
Second.
All right, as amended then, all those in favor? That's carried. Business arising, Anyone? Okay, nothing? No public considerations, notice of motion or chairs reports. Moving on to staff reports, request for subdivision frontage relief, Cadzo, for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
I believe John Neal will speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The SRD has received a subdivision referral to split a 4.03 hectare parcel on Cortes Island into 2 lots to allow the creation of 2 separate titles. And following a review of the proposal, it has been determined that while the subdivision as presented conforms to the minimum lot area requirements, proposed lot 1 with a frontage of 70.4 metres and at 9.4% will not comply with the 10% frontage requirements of the Local Government Act, or Section 15(1)(I) of the Bylaw 64, which is our subdivision servicing and procedures bylaw. And although the 70.4 metres of frontage is more than sufficient for access purposes, as the subdivision does not comply with the LGA highway frontage requirements or the section of our bylaw 64, frontage relief is required for the subdivision proposal to proceed, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors? Director Vaness?
I just want to thank John, and just want to note for everybody, this is John's last Electoral Area Services Committee meeting. And just on behalf of everyone here, just want to thank you for your 16 years worth of service, your grounded approach, your ability to stay calm and understand the depth of knowledge required to do this position has been a real asset, and we're going to miss you. Thank you, John.
On receipt, all those in favor? And that's unanimous, and that's carried.
I'll move that the committee recommend, with reference to Section 512, Section 2 of the Local Government Act, the board approve frontage relief for proposed Lot 1 as shown on the plan of subdivision attached to staff report dated October 9th, 2024.
Second.
Discussion, anyone? All those in favor of the motion? That is unanimous again and carried. And the next item is the ESA Development Permit Frumento for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Staff?
Thank you. I believe planning staff will speak to this.
Thank you to the chair and directors. This report presents 2 applications. The applications are for flood relaxation, FR 1D24, and environmentally sensitive area, DP 2D24, at 3983 Apian Way in Area D, which proposes new construction of a home within a required setback of 15 meters from Stonefly Creek, and in accordance with the floodplain management bylaw number 2782, the applicant requests a site-specific relaxation from 15 meters to 10 meters. And in addition, the property is also within the Area D Official Community Plan Development Permit Area, or DPA, and Stonefly Creek is a fish-bearing watercourse which requires riparian area protection regulation, or RAPR, and assessment, and an approved development permit for the property owner to submit a building permit application. The floodplain management bylaw has a provision for exemptions or relaxations when a restrictive covenant is registered on title of the property. The DP attached to the report includes this condition to be completed, and the engineering reports which support the application and relaxation will form part of that covenant. The environmentally sensitive area development permit is based on the EIA, the environmental impact assessment provided by the QEP, and the RAPR assessment in accordance with the development permit area guidelines of the Area DOCP, and which makes recommendations for environmental protection. Should the applications be approved, the engineering reports will form part of a Section 219 restrictive covenant that will be registered on title and will release and indemnify the regional district from any liability in the event of any damage caused by flooding or erosion prior to the issuance of a building permit. Thank you.
Thank you. Directors? Director Rice?
Thank you, Chair. Thank Thank you for the report. I had to actually read this about 4 times last night to make sure that I understood it correctly, and I'm quite confident that the SRD has done their homework. Looks like the applicant has been quite diligent in what they've been doing, so I have no issues approving this, and that's the way that I'm going. So I'll be recommending that we approve the permits on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Director Whitty?
I just have a quick question. Did you say that the covenant releases or indemnifies the SRD until the issuance of the building permit?
No, through the chair, the covenant provides or indemnifies the regional district in perpetuity. The covenant runs with the land.
Thank you for clarifying that.
On receipt, call the question. All those in favor? Unanimous, that's carried. Motion, Director Rice.
I'd like to move option B, that the committee recommend approval of the site-specific exemption for floodplain relaxation request FR 1D24 to reduce the floodplain setback from 15 meters to 10 meters as supported by the floodplain assessment dated August 15th, 2019, and geotechnical assessment dated September 25th, 2024.
Second.
Okay, discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Unanimous, that's carried. Again, Director Rice.
I'd like to move item C, that the committee recommend that the floodplain and geotechnical assessments attached to the October 9th, 2024 staff report form part of the required Section 219 covenant to be registered against title, and that the corporate officer and the chair be authorized to execute the required Section 219 covenant prior to the issuance of the building permit.
Second.
Anything on this? Seeing none, all those in favor? That is carried, unanimous. And D, Director Rice.
I'd like to move item D, that the committee recommend the approval of the ESADP for the foreshore and watercourse as attached in the October 9th, 2024 staff report, and that the corporate officer be authorized to issue the permit after registration of Section 219 covenant.
Second.
Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous, that's carried. Number 3, community system, sewer system, rights of way, Kwasiaski Cove for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Staff,
Nothing to add, but happy to answer any questions if there is.
any questions by anyone? Director Whitty?
I do have a question, Chair.
Thought you might.
Thank you. Well, I noticed this is for a statutory right-of-way, and I was curious if staff had considered that in other areas in Kwasiaski Cove where we've put in sewer lines, we've had to go back and ask for further rights-of-way for public access, and I'm not sure if this area would be suitable for paths or if that was considered. I'm just wondering if there was any consideration given to that during the, this process.
Through the chair, so this process was originally initiated about 10 years ago when the license to enter and construct agreements were issued to build the sewer itself. The area where these are, it's not a continuous right-of-way all along the road, along Pidcock Road. It only covers a few properties, and it's also in an area where there's not the best topography. So there was no consideration during this revival to amend the statutory right-of-ways to include public passage, mostly because it's a interrupted section.
Thank you.
Anything further?
Just to add something to a high level. So when we go to acquire the local government statutory right-of-ways, often on private property, often we will try and go for as much as we can get, negotiate with folks, that if we can put a path on top of that, depending what's underneath it, so on and so forth. And at times we're successful and times we're not. Sometimes folks will say, yeah, I got no problem with the sewer, but I don't want it to be a walking path. So we'll always pursue as much as we can and then pull back to where we can get an agreement with the property owner.
On receipt, call the question. All those in favor? It's carried, unanimous. And B, recommendation, Director Whitty.
I will move that the committee recommend that the statutory right-of-way agreements with the owners of properties along Pidcock Road regarding access to the Kwasiaski Cove sewer works be approved by the board.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? And anyone opposed? Seeing none opposed, that is carried. Number 4, Climate Resilience Service, areas B and C for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can, so this is just in case you saw it and go, holy, there's not enough here, it doesn't include it. This is more for discussion purposes that we want to get your input on establishing what kinds of things within the service you'd be interested in. So we've prepared, I would say, a thin service here and looking for your input on what kind of things we would want to include in establishing the service. That will help also define what kind of costs will be associated with the service. So this started with the wood debris, and then the climate resiliency made its way into there, which is fine. So what you want to do with services is, you have this this heading of whatever service you want, and then include the types of things you can and want to include within that service, and that enables it. Doesn't mean you have to do everything. It doesn't mean you have to requisition money for all of it, but it enables you to create a broad spectrum of things you can do within that service that makes sense. So if it's climate resiliency, like, I don't know, we're not gonna, build a gravel pit or something under it, but so it has to be related, right? But to create a broad spectrum of things we can do within the service.
Anything from directors? Director Winnie?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of thoughts. One of the things that I think would be really beneficial to include would be water conservation and rainwater capture incentives. And something else that I would really like to see this service being used for is as a place from which to apply for grants, which the province or the federal government or whoever is offering to build climate resilience. And I know that without a service, we don't really have a place to put that. So I think that that's a really important piece of building climate resilience in our communities, is using funds from other levels of government to build that resilience.
That's a really good point. So keep that in mind. And again, we can go around and around this till you're happy with it at the end of the day. But a really good point, because there's all kinds of funding opportunities out there. We just heard one from asset management. And as long as it's included within the service, we have the ability to apply. And then, maybe it's 100% funded, maybe it's complimentary, but we have some vehicle to do something within there. So yeah, don't be worried about if you include things in here that we're going to requisition, but yeah, keep in the back of your mind that if there's opportunities and funding, you can apply and it fits at least under here. Otherwise, where does it go and where's our complementary funding? Because often there'll be a program and it'll say, look, we're going to offer this amount of money, but you got to come up with X amount of money. You don't have a service, you don't have any requisition, you can't do it. So that's a good thing to keep in mind in terms of what you want to include in this service.
You may.
My follow-up question would be, to the CAO would be, do you have recommendations on the kind of language that would be required to keep that open-ended?
Not the language on the ability to apply for grants, but if the things you want to look at are identified in the service, then applying for a grant would be natural. So again, try and be as broad as you can with the things you want to. We can include them in the service. Again, that gives us an ability to kind of figure out what the requisition would be, but that doesn't mean you have to requisition all money, anyways. My advice always is to put more within that service, and the service is really going to be dictated about what you want to do at the end of the day and how much it's going to cost to requisition. So establishing the service and having a requisition limit doesn't impact anyone the next day. When you make a move on something, that's where the impact will be.
Director Vinesh?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited about the potential of this new service. I think it really shows leadership on not only dealing with the impacts of climate change that we know we're facing, but also taking action to reduce our carbon footprint. I have a couple of motions to update the activities in the bylaw and the cost as well, once it's been received.
Okay. Director Mooney?
I do have a follow-up question, Chair, just thinking about what the CAO said about natural asset inventories and managements that we were just talking about. So would we need to include, is that, it's something that I wasn't clear earlier, and I actually meant to ask was, when it was, if we are doing something like natural asset management or inventories, which Strathcona Regional District Department is responsible for that kind of work? Like if it was to build a framework and a policy or whatever, like the reason I guess I'm asking now is because I'm trying to understand, would we need to include the word planning or engineering, or what would that look like?
I don't think you have to do that. What we want to focus here on the types of things you would like the service to potentially enable. Not so much who's going to do it. This is just, we're gathering ideas and subject matter about what can be done underneath this. So the more input you provide, the more broad the service can be. Doesn't mean we're going to do it. But, go back to our WRV service, for example. Here's what we don't want to get into, and you can relate to this. So we have some funding ability for WRVs. We don't have a WRV service. We get this money and we go, geez, what are we going to do with it? There's nowhere to put it. We shove it in EA admin in a temporary fashion. It's not appropriate, it's not the vehicle to do things, and then after we've got possession of that, then we try and find a landing spot. So if we take that example and look at some climate resilience service, and if it's broad, and who knows what we're going to apply for, what programs come up, we get it, we dump it in there, we're good to go. So it gives you flexibility. So don't worry too much about the details of who's going to operate. We don't know what money we're going to get, where we're going to apply for it, but we want to include as much under that umbrella as we can.
Thank you.
On the receipt then, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? None opposed, that's carried. And Director Vaness, you have a second motion?
Thank you, and if Eden wouldn't mind pulling up my motions. So my first motion is just on the activities of this service. I move that the activities of the Climate Resilience Service be updated to the collection, chipping, transport, and upcycle of wood waste. And I say upcycle because one of the things I think that's exciting about this service with regards to wood chipping is that part of the challenges in the past is that this wood chips have had to be shipped off island and disposed of. And that's a real asset that we can make use of, obviously following fire smart regulations. So I want to change disposal to upcycle. And two, funding community projects that prepares the service area for the impacts of climate change or reduces the area's carbon emissions.
Got a seconder here?
Second.
Director Mooney. Discussion by anyone? All those in favor? That's carried.
And, I did some math over the last couple of days and took Area D's wood chipping costs as like sort of a base of the 0.032, assuming it's going to be somewhere in that range once staff puts that together. And then, adding more onto that for the second part of the activities. So I move that the maximum tax requisition for the Climate Resiliency Service be set to 0.069 per $1,000.
Second.
All right, anything further? Director Mooney?
I would be interested when the report comes back for there to be like a requisition graph or chart like there was in the Area D wood chipping service, where it kind of shows potential impact to the different types of properties as well as the average property. Do you need a motion, or will that just be included?
No, we can do that.
Okay.
And so I don't know if you have other motions too, but here's what we'll do till we're comfortable with this. We'll include these things in the service, see if Director Mooney has anything as well. And then we'll bring it back the next meeting. And if you have more thoughts and ideas, we can continue to populate that until we're happy with it. And it gives you an opportunity to think more about, what things maybe you'd like in here. And then once we're at that point, we'll tie a bow on it, and then we'll do the process for establishing a service. So it won't be the last time you'll see it or the last time you have an opportunity to add to the list.
Anything further, Director Winnie?
I have a further question, because the one thing that I was interested in ensuring was included was in consideration for water conservation and/or, providing rainwater capture incentives. I've seen other regional districts do that. Do you think that that language needs to be included here, or do you think that the language of Director Vanesh's motion, which was that prepares the area for the impacts of climate change, if that seems inclusive enough to you?
I would say more is better in terms of, as you know, you get experience with these services, and there's a little bit of liberty, right, about, what the service can do and provide. But the more you include, the more latitude we have when something's out there, that fits within that service. So I don't find any harm in adding things to it that we can or you would like to do. So like your comments about water conservation and rainwater capture, it would be my intent to include some language that identifies that. And if you have more stuff, let us know and we'll make sure it's included so that, because I imagine there's a lot of things out there that we are not aware of, and they might become available or reveal themselves. We're going to like that. And then we'll just go, oh, yeah, that fits under this one. So details is fine. Yeah.
Okay, on the motion.
Do you need a motion to add that, or do you?
Well, we've got a motion on the floor at the moment,
direction to
Director
staff?
Winnie, that we're supposed to be discussing.
Does she? I don't know if she does.
We already passed the
Yeah,
activities motion.
Oh, did we pass them?
Yeah, and now we're on to the cost motion.
Oh, sorry, my
On the
apologies.
cost, yeah, let's just deal with that then. If there's nothing further on cost, all those in favor?
Yeah, can I just make a comment, just based on staff comments there? I think my intention on the activities there was to keep it broad so that when we get into decision-making, we're like, oh, that word isn't in the bylaw, we can't include it. And by saying, the impacts of climate change, that prepares the service area for the impacts of climate change, that's going to include water, that includes drought, wildfire, all the things that are well-defined within what the impacts of climate change are, rather than us listing everything and then we get to the point like, oh, we didn't list rainwater capture in the thing. And it's like, okay, well, we know that water conservation is part of climate change. So I intentionally left it broad with the hopes that it gives us the opportunity in the future to be like, oh yeah, this is part of it. We don't even realize this right now, but it's in there. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, the motion is 6.9 cents per thousand. All those in favor? And that is unanimous and carried. Anything further, anyone? Director Vanesh, do you have something else? Director Winnie, did you have a motion?
I think I'm good. I think I'll wait and see how it looks like when it comes back next month.
right,
and
thank you.
We can always add more.
Next item of business, 2024 interim housing needs report for receipt.
Move receipt.
Somebody want to second that?
Second.
Director Rice, thank you. Any discussion, staff?
Thank you. I'm not, planning staff will speak to this.
Thank you, Chair. So the SRD's most recent housing needs report was published in 2022 to adhere to provincial requirements. Since then, legislative requirements have been updated, which requires all local governments to complete an interim housing needs report by January 1st, 2025. So all local governments must then produce a regular housing needs report by December 31st, 2028, and every 5 years thereafter. So the interim housing needs report requirements in accordance with the LGA and Housing Needs Report Regulation must include the number of housing units needed over 5 and 20 years, which are to be calculated using a provincially legislated methodology called the H&R method. A statement about the need for housing close to transportation infrastructure that supports walking, cycling, public transit, or other alternative forms of transportation, and actions taken by the local government since the last report to reduce housing needs. So to comply with provincial legislation, the Regional Board is required to receive the interim housing needs report at a meeting open to the public, which must then be published online. Thank you.
I just say that one of the problems with the reports of this nature is that, of course, it doesn't take into account the will of the people. And specifically in Area A, where it's all either TFL or ALR, mean, you can have as much need as you want, but there's no way you can subdivide that land. That's just a fact of life. I think the province would be aware of that. Anything further? Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I really, I have a bit of a question, and it's around specifically to Area C numbers, which is the ones that I was looking at. And I'm hoping that you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one, because it looks to me that the total, when you look at the total household numbers, the number of renters has been decreasing as the number of homeowners has been increasing significantly. It's gone from 2006 from 285 renters down to 250 in 2021. And the rental requirements that's on page 22 of the report says that in 20 years, we're only going to need 4.18 new rentals on Quadra Island to achieve I don't even know what, to achieve the right number of the right vacancy rental. So I have some concerns with this number because I'm not sure that it accurately reflects the actual need of rental units, which on Quadra Island. I think that, I'm saying Quadra, obviously I'm talking about Area C, but Quadra Island is where the majority of the population is. If homes are being taken out of the rental stream to use as short-term rentals or other things, obviously mostly short-term rentals, I don't think that's really accurately representing the needs of rentals on the island. And I guess my sort of like thought on that is that if there is a housing society or if the regional district housing service is looking to create purpose-built rentals or below market rentals, and we're using this housing needs assessment report to sort of bolster our process or identify the need, saying that we only need 4 new rentals within 20 years just doesn't seem to accurately capture the need. So I don't know if there's a way of reassessing this number or looking and using, you're saying that you have to use a specific calculator from the province, but that calculator is based on the current rental number, which has gone down in the last 15 years. So are we allowed to add other factors to the equation? I guess would be sort of one of my questions. And more broadly, can you think of ways to adjust this report to reflect possibly the real renter need?
If I may, through the chair, thank you, Director Winning, for your question. This particular process is very, very prescriptive. The province both has dictated the data that we use as well as the method to perform the calculation. So for this purpose, we are not able to amend or adjust how that report is processed because we are being compliant with the Act. That said, aspirational goals for increasing rental housing as a proportion of your overall housing landscape or ways to incentivize that, those conversations are more appropriately held within the process for your OCP update or through the housing service. So this doesn't limit us to only try to incentivize, that 4-unit target. That is the projection that is meeting our prescribed need as Stats Canada data indicates. So it's somewhat difficult, I know, and we deal with this in electoral areas all the time because the Statistics Canada data is aggregated over a larger area as well. So it's somewhat harder for us to pinpoint kind of specific need in a smaller area. For instance, to break it out over an electoral area between different islands within, for instance, we're not able to do that through this process. But again, that type of data gathering is something that we would do more fulsomely through the OCP.
Director Rice is first.
Thank you, Chair. I have the same question. When I took a look at, item 1.3 key findings, I was quite alarmed when you're saying that Area D grew by 18% since 2011, and yet you take a look at Statistics Canada, 2016 to 2021, it was 4.4%. I take a look at the number that the province is using to estimate our population. So Stats Canada is saying that we're roughly over, as of 2021, little over 4,100 people. Province is saying, no, we're a little over 4,300 people. And then I also take a look that, having been involved with census, I have quite a large population that I believe in Area D gets lost in the census because we have trailer parks. And, you know, we know that the census go out to an actual address. So I'm quite concerned with how that projects, because then when you start looking at, if you're saying that we're at 18%, and then you start looking at a future projection into 2026, in my mind, your number is already skewed, and it only gets worse the further you go out. So there's no doubt we need housing, but what is the number? And I think that that's quite confusing in this report. So the other thing is, I did go back and take a look at the previous report in 2022, and lo and behold, it had the same information in it. So kind of disappointing between the two reports. That's my thoughts.
Director Manish, or staff, you got something?
Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, just more of an editorial on that, because I agree with both you. It's one of the challenges when you get prescribed things to do by either the feds or the province in there, and then they say use these calculators, use these numbers, and use these tools, and you put the numbers in, they come out and they don't reflect what practically is happening. I'll just kind of draw a parallel that's similar to this, let's say in connectivity, when we make applications for last mile communities. It's 2024, almost 2025. They make us use 2016 statistics for the applications. And we say two things. One, obviously they're old. And two, you don't understand rural communities, is that whether it's conforming or not, you have more homes on properties than your statistics say, and your statistics are 8 years old. But they force you through that. And so let's say you're successful, the second you get that, we're short homes, short money already. Mm-hmm. So I don't know the cynical purpose about using these, how it benefits the province in some way, but we already know, practically speaking, the numbers don't align with what's going on in the communities or the community's needs. So as Meredith says, we have to use another conduit to try and drive that and figure out what we need.
Ripley benefits treasury.
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. Because then they get to say we provided funding for that community, and that technically in itself is true. However, we all know practically it's insufficient the day you get it.
Okay, Director Manish.
Thank you, Chair, and appreciate the discussion here. Sharing similar concerns as Director Rice and Director Mawhinney. I'm looking at Cortez Island. It says we need 2.43 more units in 20 years. I've got a housing development that's wanting to build 24 units, and there's 200 people on the waiting list. There's 30% of people on Cortez living on unstable housing because they have to move out in the summers, or they don't have basic amenities in their house. And I appreciate the need for more housing, but I'm concerned that this report is just going to push through the housing that we don't necessarily need. What we need is affordable housing, and what we need is rental housing. And I'm, looking to you, Mr. Leach, as far as, what can we do here to better communicate the realities on the ground of our electoral areas?
Well, I think it's, this is a tool, it's mandated, we have to do it. I would agree that we would inherently look at it as a tool to try and resource funding. I think that's kind of one of the purposes of it. Said, hey, this community has X need. But the results of this said this community doesn't have much of a need, which is a challenge. I don't know if the document ends up being that useful to us or as an attachment for that. So it's mandated, it's legislative, we do it, we tick a box. I don't know how much use it really has for us practically.
Yeah. I guess, one of my concerns is Rainbow Ridge, our housing development on Cortez, we've been denied by BC Housing 3 times. And, if BC Housing is looking at oversubscribed grant application. They're looking at, oh yeah, Cortez only needs 2.33 more rental units. Let's go to this other place that needs more. Like, we have
Yeah,
to do
no,
some pushback.
I'm with you, and I think the chair's cynical comment, which I agree with, I think that's the answer you're chasing down. Again, I got a lot of cynical thoughts in it. I think you're bang on, but it doesn't align practically with what your community needs. So here's the legislation, here's a requirement, do this, produce this thing using these numbers, this calculator, punch it out, and this is what you get. And yeah, I think that's exactly what they do, which works against us in terms of trying to access funding. I'll bet you, I would be shocked if the province wasn't taking these reports and using them as a tool to evaluate. So how do we get around it, though, when we're required to do it, use their numbers and use their calculator? I think you've figured that out. I don't know if there's a way around it other than we focus on other things. But yeah, I would be shocked if BC Housing in assessing applications doesn't go to these and go, 2 housing units required? No.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. What we do, focus on other means, right? Like what are you going to do when this is mandated and this is a tool and these are numbers you're going to use and you spit this thing out?
Yeah, I get it. We don't
Might
have
be
a choice.
a UBCM issue again, right? As you know, I've told you, as we go through these terms, they're journeys, they're not sprints, they're marathons. This, goes into your arsenal of things to meet with the province and go like, look, we have a housing need. We know how these are funded and we know the tools you're using, but the tools you're using are, they're skewed in your favor to focus on much, much larger communities. That's an issue.
Yeah.
And I would put it in your library of whether they ministry meetings, because don't forget, we can make meetings with ministers, well, wait till the election's over, but we can make meetings with ministers anytime we want and go to Victoria and say, look, we got an issue with this kind of stuff. What are you guys doing, right? So advocacy is something we can do, and that's what I would suggest with something like this. It's produced, we'd accept it. What are we going to do about it? And then we go and meet with them and go, like, what are you guys using this for? Because
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. When we do submit this report, are we just kind of literally putting numbers into boxes and pressing send? Or are we sending this written report?
Thank you to the chair. There is a portal. We are not submitting anything as a report. Everything goes in as data.
Yeah, okay. So it seems like on that side of things, we're stuck. We've got to deal with this. So, I'm happy to receive this right now. And then I think I'm going to make a motion for staff to work with the electoral area directors and get a meeting with the relevant ministry and advocate for this because this is serious.
We're still in receipt, Director Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. I do have another comment or two about this report. And one thing that I really don't think that this report, and no shade on staff because we're clear on how it was, the numbers were arrived at, but it really doesn't take into consideration the unique constraints of islands and the natural resources that islands have, talking specifically about water and aquifers. And I do have concern that we're moving into doing an official community plan in Area C. And one of the things which the new webpage has identified is that the housing needs report numbers are used in the official community plan. So I guess my concern is that it's saying that we're going to need another 633 homes in 20 years. And if that number is having to be projected into the OCP as is, how do we manage that number in consideration of like island sustainability and finite resources and aquifers? So it really doesn't seem appropriate to me considering the climate crisis and the droughts and water availability concerns. We've had that staff report recently which identified that in the Cove, to have a water system, we're going to need possibly 11 wells to create a water system and more than $4 million, and we have a moderate chance of success. How do we square that with a need as this is identifying for another 633 homes, unless we're going to start building a community on another island, get a new ferry. So that's another one of my concerns, and I don't think that we can address that here, but I do just want to highlight that I think that we need to be really cautious when we're moving into our OCP conversations about using these numbers as the numbers that we have to paint into the OCP.
Plus, I might just add, when considering the OCP, the will of the people is crucial on this, and if they don't want 300 more subdivisions, they shouldn't have to be forced to have them.
Well, thank you, and I do agree with that. So I was wondering if it was possible to either write a statement at the beginning of this. This is a draft housing needs assessment report, I'm assuming, because, you know, we're going to probably spell Strathcona right in the cover eventually. And I'm just wondering if it's possible to put a statement in the introduction regarding the figures and how they were arrived at, and at the prescribed nature of the creation of it, so that or an addendum. And is it possible to have an addendum which we actually identify more likely the known and projected needs, or do we have to only use these databases that the government is prescribing to us?
Thank you through the chair. This particular report is prescriptive, so we're not really able to amend it much. As I already mentioned, and thank you to your point, this report is certainly not intended to replace the OCP process, and certainly identifying priorities for the community. Again, their method that they have provided builds on what our historic growth rate is. It projects that out to a future and looks at how many houses you would need in order to meet the need if growth continued as it has historically. It is not what we are advocating for as the community for what kind of growth we want to happen. That's what happens through your OCP process. So this becomes one piece of information, not the only piece, certainly not even the paramount piece of information. So I guess to temper your concerns, perhaps, is to recognize that what this is meeting a legislative requirement from the province. And we are somewhat limited in what we can do about that. If this report is to be made available on our website, for instance, we can provide more preamble on the website itself. But as far as what the province receives from us, that is prescriptive.
How about notwithstanding the previous published provincial mandated report? Here's the real one.
I just have one follow-up, if I may, Chair, and it's just quick. It's just that the staff is suggesting that we're using growth rates. But this report shows that in Area C, at least, in the last 15 years, there's been a growth of 225 homes. And it's projecting that there's going to be 633, or there should be 633 in 20 years, and so I don't think that the numbers that are being used for the projections are necessarily accurate, because I think that you're including municipal growth rates, and it makes sense for municipalities to grow faster. There's more services. It's easier to service people when they're close together. And I disagree wholeheartedly, and I think this is really important for us to bring to the province, that electoral areas' growth is being dictated by municipal growth rates.
I think just for a point of clarification, this is not dictating a growth rate. It's looking back to say if we had the same growth rate, that's what would accommodate it. It's not dictating that we have to meet that.
All right, let's call the question on receipt. All those in favor? That's unanimous and it's carried. And a motion, please.
I move that SRD staff work with electoral area directors to contact the relevant ministry and Visit Victoria to advocate for the necessary changes that we've been discussing.
Second.
Thank you, Director Rice. Discussion on that? All those in favor? And that's carried.
And I'm thinking I might have another motion. I don't want to just burden staff here, but it does, just hearing the last thing that was spoken about, that, one, we released this to the province, and two, we released this on our website. And I'm wondering if there is capacity and for updating this report to consider the things that we've spoken about here and more accurately reflect the real housing needs in our communities.
Well, I think what you've heard is we can't update the report, but what we can do, as Meredith said, we can do some kind of preamble on putting it on our website, and we can certainly, bring back a report with some suggestions on that, what that looks like. We can't massage the report because it's so prescriptive, but certainly when we put it on our website, we can put a whole bunch of asterisks and disclaimers on that. And if you like, we can bring a staff report on some suggested language that we can use. I would love that. All right.
Now, recommendation B here, is that a mandatory thing that we need to pass or not?
Pretty much.
we
I mean,
better
if
do
we
it then.
don't meet the requirement. I don't know what the penalty would be for it, but that it's just meeting the legislative requirement, so.
Okay, well, somebody put it on the floor then if you.
Question to the chair, do you think there's value in not submitting this and like using that as a form of protest?
I don't know if you're going to advocate for housing and then not follow
know,
their
it's
process.
yeah.
They're not going to like that.
I do have a question, Chair, and that is, I don't think we have to submit this until February, but maybe
January.
January? Okay. So is there an opportunity for us to not make this recommendation right now and instead have a report come back to us in November, which has a bit of a preamble, and we can talk about that, and we could move that together with the report towards the board?
I mean, I suppose, again, because of what I understand is the prescriptive nature of the report, maybe we can defer it, and then with the deferral, we'll bring back the language that we were going to support on posting it on the website, but with the understanding that we're not going to change the report itself. Happy to do that if you want to.
That's a good idea.
I would prefer them to move forward together. I think that it
Sure.
also can
Yeah.
show the province that what our concerns are.
Okay, I'll make a motion
Oh,
that,
hold a second, we got a motion on the floor, but we don't have a seconder.
did you make a motion?
Did you make a motion?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, misunderstood you, I thought you were moving it. It was just a comment, just a comment, all right. Well, I thought you had made a deferral motion, or was it just a suggestion?
I think she was going
discussion.
to.
So I'll make a motion that we defer receiving this report until November, and that staff work to create a preamble to the report that takes into consideration recent housing surveys and the concerns that we've raised here to provide more accurate information to the public when we do release it.
You second that, Director Winnie?
Yes. And
Thank
I,
you. All right, on the question then, all those in favor? That's carried. Okay, number 6, proposed electoral area grant and aid service for receipt.
Move receipt.
second.
Okay, so I'll just make a comment here as we open it for discussion. We're counting on staff's creativity here to make it some way that we can have a requisition that balances with expenditures for each electoral area.
Yeah, and if I may, Mr. Chair, so I'm not worried about that part because look, we all work together and we'll create a policy, and if you vote against your own policy, that's on you. But again, I think the simplest thing, if we're going to establish just to keep it simple, we requisition that. Let's say we go to your one-on-ones and you say, I want to requisition X amount of dollars for grant and aid. You're likely all going to requisition different amounts. That's going to mean different amounts to each area. It goes into one pot, and then we just create a policy for extracting that money. And then when and if it goes beyond that, we create in that policy the ability for X, Y, and Z. It happens with our, what's the title of it? We share is it a constituency expense, Mike? Yeah. And we contribute to it unequally, but we withdraw on it on an understanding, if you will.
Right.
So
What you're saying is excellent. So there's a way to requisition that isn't just a blanket requisition amount for each
Right,
electoral area.
right. So Okay, just, so my idea is, and I don't know why this can't work, you tell us what you want to requisition. We have these services in the electoral areas already. We're requisitioning, you're all requisitioning different amounts of money. We take those and we create a policy for extraction, and it's
Yeah.
whatever you like, right?
This is what we want.
I can't see why that wouldn't work. Again, they may somewhat contradict each other, but if the committee follows their own policy, which I
that's not
don't
a
know why
problem.
you wouldn't,
Yeah.
then.
The expenditure side is not a problem. It's just the requisition side.
Yeah, I mean, then we all have services that we can requisition out of, so.
Well, Mr. Chairman, just a word of caution that there has to be a cost-sharing formula in the bylaw. So, so I'm not sure that individual directors can say, I want X or Y raised. I mean, there would have to be some agreement as to what the total requisition would be for a given year. And that would be based on some kind of a cost-sharing formula for raising funds. How the money is spent is an entirely different matter, and I agree it could be done by policy, whatever, but there would have to be some kind of formula that the directors were comfortable with that said we're going to raise it on this basis throughout our service area.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that. So we have we have a requisition formula, and that is going to be agreed upon by the group. So it's the extraction part that.
No, the extraction is not a problem. It's
Right.
the requisition. But the problem is that we can set up that form that could be done by percent for the first year. But if you say requisition for 20,000 for your area and spend 5, you don't want to requisition 20 the next year. So we don't want to have to amend the bylaw every year to change the percents. That's the problem.
Right. I think if you leave that with us of what you want, we can create mostly the policy of how we deal with it. I can't imagine we can't come up with something. We understand, yeah, so we create some formula on requisition. And then, so we create a new service, we create some formula on requisition. We know we're gonna collect, whatever formula do, we're gonna collect unevenly on that.
That's not a problem for the first year. But
Right,
for the
first
second
year. So then the second year, okay, well, let me think about that. We'll come up with
Now,
something.
if you can't come up with something, and I'm afraid you can't, because we tried this a couple of years ago. The other option would be, and I don't know if Director Rice, are you into this joint service or not?
No, and that's what I'm waiting to say, is that I don't know what's wrong with the system we already have. So I don't know why we're
Well, I'll
wanting
tell you
to.
about that when we get to policy.
Okay.
Okay,
But-
if I can, the thing that we're in this position, we have a grant and aid service that the board is required to vote on. I believe the EAs want to create, for lack of a better term, a subsequent grant and aid service that only the EAs vote on. I think that's why we're here.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to just give you a suggestion in case this thing goes west and can't work. And that is, if Director Rice isn't interested in participating, it makes it a lot easier, that we set up for each electoral area 2 new services. And there'll be 2 participant services. One would be A and B, the other would be B and C. And these participant services, one would be, say, called a grant and aid service, the other could be called an economic assistance service. On these 2 services shared between 2 electoral areas, it would be requisitioned by percentage. One area would pay 99.9%, it would pay 1/10 of 1%. For the second service, it'd be reversed. So when it comes to requisition, one area would requisition all their money and make all their grants and aids from that one, the other would make all their grant and aids from the other one. So the requisition would be fair, it'd be a veto on either side, so nobody could cheat. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. So leave that part with me. I will put our
Just a
heads together and come up with
In
something.
case all else fails.
Right, okay. And so that part aside, the requisition, how we figure that out, I guess, is there anything else based on what we've populated in here. So let's park that one, because this is going to come back.
Yeah, you know what we want. So
Yeah.
I guess the next step will be bring back a draft
Yeah.
bylaw.
So what we've got a draft here, and I guess my question is, based that issue aside about the collection and the distribution, is there any other comments that you can give us, likes or dislikes, about what you see
Yes.
in this, so we can amend that
There
and
is
bring it
one.
back? Okay.
If we are able to do this joint electoral areas grant aid service, we need to have a clause in there that would state with notification by any electoral area, say by November of each year, they can withdraw from the service. Because the directors we currently have can do this well, but in the future, you never know who might sit at the table, and things can go west really fast. And there has to be a way that you can withdraw from the service.
There's a way, I won't swear to it, that there's, that it happens that easily, though. Again, I'm not saying it pertains to this, but let's say you have a service of 3 members, whatever it is, and let's say that service then commits to borrowing $5 million. And then you can't have the ability, let's say the next year, the EA director says, I'm out of that, and burden the current members
That's
with
right,
it.
I understand.
So it's not that easy, but leave that thought with us,
Right.
the principal, and we'll see if we
Yeah.
can.
It can be except for debt and so on.
Yeah, okay, we'll leave the idea with us, and
That's a thought.
we'll think.
Now, directors, I don't want to monopolize conversation. Do you have something to say, Director? Dinesh?
No, I don't. I think I'm in support of what's been discussed and the path forward here.
Is it fair to, just amongst the group, that when we look at this, we just don't include D?
I haven't made that decision yet.
Okay.
I'm just trying to explore options. I'm just wondering, again, I'm taking a look at what we currently do. I'm taking a look at this. I like to keep my options open. So I'm not opposed at this point in time. I'm just trying to
well-
wrap my brain around,
Okay.
what are you all trying to achieve with this service?
It's draft, so
Yeah.
we'll keep you in.
Put you in draft bylaw. If you don't like it, you take yourself out.
That's
next
right.
meeting.
Okay.
All right.
Do you need a motion here to?
We're on receipt, first of all. Yes, Director Moody?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to confirm that what the goal is that we are able to, like, it talks about an annual limit on maximum requisition, but really the goal is that we each are able to decide on an annual basis what we believe the appropriate requisition is, and that it would be adjustable by area within the service.
That's the goal for sure, and I'm going to try and come up with something creative. It may not be perfect, but again, leave that with me. I get what we want. We want to be able to annually say, I want to contribute this, have a formula for how we extract out, and have it be consistent year over year. So I get that. We'll just come up with something that we believe comes very close to that.
And let me just conclude that if the inspector of municipalities doesn't sign it, we can change it a bit, try again.
Well, I think one of the advantages we have over, you've got two kind of, again, for lack of a better term, opposing forces, is you got local government act and legislation, but then you can create your own policy that you agree to following this process. And then if you don't agree to that, then look at yourselves in the mirror, right?
Distraction's not a problem.
Yeah.
Not a problem whatsoever.
I don't think unless there's other than that issue, the requisition extraction module and who's in it, if there's anything else within here, direction or motion, be happy to take that. If there isn't, then we'll just focus on that requisition extraction and just bring this back. This is going to come back a couple times, I imagine.
No, I think that's it then. We'll see what you come back with. All right, we're on receipt then. Let's deal with that first.
Move receipt.
Second.
That was already moved. We need to vote on it. So all those in favor? And that's unanimous and that's carried. So do we need a motion to bring back a draft? It'll come back. Okay. All right, moving right along to grant and aid policy review for receipt, please.
Move receipt.
Second.
Now, I just have a few comments on this before I open it up to directors.
Yeah, so this is just to refresh everyone's memory. So this is the overall grant and aid policy, if you will, that we have, and it is going to municipal services, and it was to come to here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Now, there's two things on page 2 of the July 29 staff report that aren't specifically addressed in the draft policy. There's bullet number 2 says organizations that regularly receive grants should establish a service. That's just one point there. And then the final comment in that 29 report says staff will have an analysis for the board on compliance with policy. So I'd like to discuss those 2 points first, and then afterwards we'll go through the actual draft policy point by point. But all that being said, and I think this is a very lengthy discussion. We're probably not going to get all the way through it today. We're 11:30 already. So we're probably going to need to defer it to a further meeting, but I just want to open this up, and staff probably aren't going to agree with me on this. But this is the bullet number, well, the very first bullet actually on page 2 of the staff report, and it's also section 3 of the draft policy. And because, in my opinion, this is a showstopper. This can't work. And the reason is, and I don't know if all directors realize how potentially serious this could be.
What is that? Could you?
Well, staff's statement is grant requests should be submitted directly to the regional district rather than those requests supported by the director. Maybe staff doesn't quite fully understand our concern with this and why we've always opposed it. So just imagine for a moment that some director, a municipal director, I won't mention who, discreetly suggests, and they've always done this in the past, in the far past, to the Cameroon River Museum, to the Art Gallery, to the Beacon Club, to the Sport Recovery Society, the Tourism Campbell River, the Tidemark Theatre, on and on and on. Why don't you guys make an application to the electoral areas for grants and aid? Now, under the proposed method, then staff would receive these requests, not us, and then we wouldn't have any ability to immediately deny them or discuss with the applicant, is this appropriate? Or discuss with them, well, the amount you're asking is way beyond what we can afford to spend. Maybe we could, have some reduction in what you're asking for. Then the grant and aid requests are going to come on the electoral areas agenda. Now, let's suppose at electoral areas, we look at these and say, wait a minute, we don't want to support this. We deny the request. Then it goes to the board. Now, when it hits the board takes a look at it, and the whole board has a vote on this. They say, wait a minute, we like this grant and aid request. We approve it, and they vote for it. And there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. And they might also say, well, wait a minute, they're only asking for $1,000. That's enough. Let's make it $5,000. And we'd have no say whatsoever. The board could totally run our grants and aids. Now, in the past, for example, 2008, before many of you were here, I gave grants and aids to every single one of those Campbell River institutions that I mentioned. Every one of them. I did that every year. And I gave about $10,000 a year to Campbell River institutions, and the other 3 electoral areas gave more, and they were making about $50,000 a year on us. And then the municipal boards, or municipal directors at the board, started to do the exact same thing they're doing now, take control. And I said to them at that time, if you guys keep this up, I'm going to cut all my funding. They did anyway. I cut all the funding. Now I don't give them a cent. And they lost a lot of money over that. And that's exactly where we're at now. Now, my little mouse isn't working here. I think it would be safer and more appropriate for the grant and aid requests to come, as they always have, exclusively to the electoral director. Then, see, what happens is we have no idea of knowing how many grant and aid requests we'll get in a year. So what we always traditionally used to do is, as they'd come, we just sit on them and we wait till later in the year when we had maybe 10 or 20. And we say, okay, well, I've only got this much money. I'll go through them and pick out the ones that I think are most appropriate and that I can afford, and those are the ones who get the funding, the others won't. If they come to, and this is basically what Cortez is doing now with their own system, but if they come to us one at a time and they go to the board and they're approved, then we're going to run out of money before we ever get to the ones that we think we really want to support. And that's why that system doesn't work. So I know staff doesn't like that, but that's the way we see it.
No, I'm not, then maybe I'll surprise you here then. I'm not going to disagree with that. That is a good point. I hadn't actually thought about then if the East directors, let's say, didn't support it, the board could I'll give you that.
Thank you.
However, I'll give you something on because that's a good point. However, not naming names, but we've never gotten, how is, let's say, the board, forget staff, how is the board going to know if they'll only get what is given to you? And you and I both know 100% that grants and aid were given to directors that then never came to ESCA, the board. That director would say, I don't like you, forget it. And so they're in transparency, they don't have even the ability to get their request on the docket.
That's right.
So the staff, where that comes from, the staff is, we're unbiased. If Mike gets something, it's on, right? Like good, bad, or indifferent. Like we don't make any judgment on that. So think of then a way that you can ensure folks that maybe aren't in favor of certain people can get there. That's the only the impetus of that coming to staff. That's the only reason that is on there, to ensure transparency of what those people want makes its way.
Right. But look at it this way.
So this is I agree.
This isn't a personal decision. In a democracy, when we're elected because we represent the people and we do what they want. Now, if we're continuously refusing to fund something the community wants, they'll find somebody else who can do the job.
That's true as well. However, when somebody makes that request, that let's say for grant and aid, that request comes to the board. Like it shouldn't come to that individual director. Like you're a member of a 14-member board.
I understand that.
So
Workable. And
yeah, no, I get it. There's two sides to it, right?
There
And
is two sides.
I'm not saying
How
from
about
my
a
perspective,
compromise?
you're right. And it's not a deal breaker from my perspective. Like this isn't a hill I'm going to die on. It might also be a moot point through the EA grant and aid service.
Yeah.
That
if we get that, then it's a moot point.
right, because if somebody, then let's say you have two parallel services. If somebody wants to make, let's say there's an individual, I can't imagine there's one, but that isn't in your favor in the valley. That was a joke. That says, I'd submit this to Gerald, but he's not going to support it. I'll submit it to the board. That still allows them a vehicle then. And so that could still exist. Whether they submit that or not, I mean, that's up to them.
Yeah.
But if you had an EA grant and aid service.
When we approve or deny a grant and aid, we don't do it as individuals. We do it as what we feel the community would support. And that's what the basis of our political success is. You do what the community supports. I mean, if you run your own show, you wouldn't last one term.
Yeah, no, I get it. It's that maybe this is surprising. That isn't a hill we're going to die on. I mean, and just so you know, that what's in this policy, because you've been around for a long time, this is just the draft that's never got adopted for years and years and years. So even though it stays there, it's not like I'm going, that stays on.
That's a clause we'd want removed. Director Winesh.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a good point. If we get our own electoral area service, this is all going to be a moot point. So I'm going to be making a motion to defer this. And secondly, just feedback that I've received from my community so far is, uproar, really. All the nonprofits have signed a letter saying this is not the process we want. And on Cortez, we've got a really amazing process. We say we have, X number of dollars for this year for grant and aid. Everybody submits an application. People who are not involved in those applications volunteer to be on a jury. They go through a process that, identifies the highest needs in the communities to pick the projects that are going to have the biggest impact, but also goes through a process where if an organization applies for $5,000, another project applies for $5,000, and there's some negotiation that happens where we go back to those applicants and say, look, there's not enough for you both to get $5,000. Could you both do something for $2,500? And it allows to be really a community organic process that's going to be missed if it comes to staff. And I think that's really, really important because, but I also agree with what Mr. Leach is saying is around the transparency side of things. I think there is room for, I think all the applications that come into Cortez and go through this jury process, those can be included in a staff report. So the public can see, okay, these are all the organizations that applied. These are the ones that got funding, and that process is transparent. But as far as the process of bringing the applications to the board, I'm adamant that it's really important that it goes through a community process, or that the directors who hold the knowledge in our own communities and are really coming from a place of like, well, I know what's best for my community, that's the first step that it goes through.
So if I can, I think it's more therapy for me than anything else. So the chair spoke to how he's going to say something that staff didn't like, and maybe I surprised him. I'm going to say something that maybe you're not going to like. I agree with everything you say. The big however is that autonomy that you're speaking about is not something that the Local Government Act provides you. So all of you are a member of a 14-group board, and there isn't the autonomy. In fact, whenever you go through the Local Government Act, whenever it leads to individual autonomy, it says run and hide. So what you're doing in principle, I don't disagree with, but you're not provided that autonomy through the Act. That's the challenge.
Okay.
But what's the consequences? I mean, if the public complains, we change it.
The consequence, look, I'm not saying the consequences. It's just, again, I'm not trying to be that guy, that stickler.
No, but it's a philosophical difference. That's all.
Kinda, it's philosophical, but then the Act says you're not provided. Like that group provides advice to you, but you're not entitled that autonomy.
But
like
it's
that.
unofficial.
Pardon me?
It's like a town hall meeting. It's unofficial.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. But those people should, by the Act, be allowed to deliver that to the board, not to your group, and say, hey, what do you all think about this, instead of it being funneled there? Because, again, that autonomy is, the entitlement through the Act is that people provide that to the board and 14 people discuss it.
Dr. Rice would like to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just want to say that the way that I've dealt with grants being new is that I've forwarded everything to staff. Staff have been quite considerate, asking me before it goes on the agenda, do I support the entire grant? I've had an opportunity to push back, so I don't have a problem with that. And, all of the grants that we've received, not all of them got the amount that they were asking for. And I think it's understood. So, yes, I hear what everybody else is doing, but I think that it's if it comes to the directors first, we still have to have some kind of method in play that provides some transparency on, how did we get the request and what are we going to do with it? So that's just my thoughts.
Did you deny any, Dr. Rice? No. No, okay. I was curious to see what would happen if you denied any. It would have gone to the board anyway.
That I don't know.
Yeah. That's the concern.
So I don't believe, I might be off by maybe one, but I don't believe we've ever had a grant made come to the board or committee with a denial.
Yeah, it happened to me in my last round. There was one that was denied.
To the board?
Yeah.
No, but that came from your group saying they wouldn't support it.
Well, we denied NOBAs in the past.
Because it wasn't going to the
There have been very few grant requests that have been denied by the board. We don't know how many have been denied, out in Cortez or whatever.
Yeah, I could tell you that we get like at least twice as many applications as there is money. And it's a really hard process. And, again, I think there's more transparency that we can bring as far as.
Because the board hasn't seen that twice as many. The board has no idea, only you do, and that's not the autonomy that's provided to you.
Yeah. Well, I think we do have a long agenda here, and I think there's lots more we can discuss, and I'd love to sort of end the discussion here and defer this until the next ECC meeting.
What was that, Director Rice?
I said I'd like to call the question.
On receipt? All right, on receipt, let's call the question. All those in favor? And that's unanimous, and that's carried. Okay, I think it's 11:45. We should probably refer this to the next meeting because there's an awful lot of material here that we want to read.
Yeah, so I think there is a lot more we could say, Director Mooney, and I think at this point, like, let's defer it to the next EASC. It allows us a chance to get back more to our community.
Yeah, we've been circling this for years, so I think.
I've got comments on every point.
Yeah, so, yeah, happy to keep
Let's
bringing
hit
it
it
back. I
next
mean,
up.
it's been on the
I'll
table for
move. To
years.
that effect?
I'll move to defer this item to the next EASC agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Director Rice. All those in favor? That's carried. All right, let's see if we can deal with the rest of these things. Got to go down about 3 pages here of notes. Here we go. Bylaws, number 1, 577, Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw Amendment, short-term rentals for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Dr. Mooney?
Thank you, Chair. And I do have a few comments because the motion at the top of this report says that in bylaw number 577, the term resort retain its current definition while further being amended to refer to the definition of tourist accommodation. That was the motion that we made at the last meeting. And I made the motion because the current definition of a resort in the Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw is a facility for transient guests where the primary attraction is generally recreation features or activities and includes private yacht clubs or other private clubs. So here in this report that we have, we can see that the bylaw that has been attached has added definitions of private club and private yacht club. But currently, for planning purposes, private yacht clubs should be treated like resorts. But it doesn't read like that in the new draft bylaw because those references to private yacht clubs have been removed from the definition of resort. So I know that in the staff report, it identifies a desire for definitions to conform to provincial norms. However, within the remote islands of Area C, I would argue that there is required further clarification and definition. So I'm hoping if staff could explain why including private yacht club in the definition of resort is so problematic. Because right now I'm not comfortable with removing all traces of the fact that private yacht clubs could operate as a resort and not be zoned as one. And I would be curious to hear from staff the recommendation to ensure that private yacht clubs and private clubs are included in a resort type definition if they don't like the motion that was made at the last table.
Thank you, through the chair. As proposed, so going back and reviewing the definitions that were in place, we were able to affirm kind of the recommendations that we had made in the past, that making those changes would not fundamentally change how the definitions are or uses within the bylaw are interpreted or how the bylaw is implemented. Currently, both public clubs and private yacht clubs are not a permitted use that is in the bylaw currently. They're referenced in the policy section and they're defined. So it doesn't fundamentally change how that bylaw is interpreted or implemented. Furthermore, it does introduce a new layer of confusion because by not being in alignment with the provincial definition for a resort that we are using in our other bylaws and with the Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act, it adds a layer of confusion that we're hoping to avoid by defining those things separately. If that answers your question.
On receipt, anything further, Director Mooney?
May I follow up, Chair? A follow-up would be that, so if they're defined, private yacht club and private club are being defined now, but you don't think that adding them to the definition of resort is tenable, like was it appropriate then to add them to the definition of tourist accommodation? Because essentially what you've done is just redirected the word resort, right? Resort is essentially a redirect to tourist accommodation now. And I see the difference in my own mind between a resort and a tourist accommodation. And that, to me, private yacht club does fit in that resort definition, maybe slightly better than tourist accommodation. But yeah, I'm just curious if it could be added there, just so that, I mean, we're talking about an area of quite a few islands, and it seems like a private yacht club could be a way of skirting some of the rules.
Through the chair, again, it doesn't change how the bylaw is currently interpreted or understood or implemented. Continues to be staff recommendation that our definition of resort would be in alignment with the provincial definition and consistent across other SRD regulatory bylaws, so that we are applying a consistent definition and not a unique definition in each different area. So by defining private clubs and private yacht clubs as their own thing, that allows us to provide better clarity for the public as to what those things are, and also then to maintain that clear understanding of what a resort is or tourist accommodation is in relation to the province and their definitions.
Thank you. That is helping me to get closer to understanding, but I'm curious if there was a private yacht club that was, like as it is defined in here, that's for accommodation for their members and their guests, and that would be considered possibly a short-term rental. If it was a guest that was, renting something, and it doesn't seem like it's necessarily being included, that piece.
Through the chair, so the way that the Provincial Short-Term Rental Accommodations Act interprets tourist accommodation may or may not apply to a private yacht club, because the definition hinges on whether it is an offering to the public. So I'm not aware if there would be some conflict here. Our review of this indicated that that would not create a new conflict. And so by having them separate, we are ensuring that there is not confusion between the provincial definition of tourist accommodation and our own for the purposes of short-term rental.
But now it feels like it's been completely removed. Like you're defining them, but before they were only private yacht clubs were permitted where resorts were permitted, and now they aren't included in resorts. So where do they exist? How would they be zoned or labeled?
As private yacht clubs. Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. They're currently permitted within the policy section of the land use or the rural land use bylaw that references private yacht clubs as a form of tourist accommodation. It is not expressly permitted in the regulatory section of that bylaw. So it wouldn't be, there is not a change in how it is applied.
So they're already in the bylaw, and now you're asking to remove them, essentially, because they're no longer, you said that they are considered a type of resort?
No, they are not a type of resort. They are a type of tourist accommodation,
Okay.
which is defined differently.
And so are they going to be added to the definition of tourist accommodation?
They're currently defined as their own thing. So if you look at the bylaw as presented, definitions have been added for private club and private yacht club.
Did you, sorry to be so, I feel like I'm just not understanding this. Did you not just tell me that they are in the preamble as a type of tourist accommodation, but now private yacht club is not included in the definition of tourist accommodation?
They're a commercial, sorry. Sorry, I don't have the bylaw here. They're listed as a commercial use. So they're not considered a resort. They're not included in that definition. They're listed as a commercial. They are permitted in commercial zones, and that is still how they are interpreted.
They are currently included in the definition of resort. In the current bylaw, the definition of resort includes them. So now you've deleted that definition and deleted them as a reference to resort.
Because that was inaccurate. So, because they are not a resort, they're private clubs. They're not open to the general public.
So they couldn't offer accommodation tourist accommodation. They were commercial tourist accommodation.
I guess I'm not understanding your question.
Well, I just thought you said that they were considered a commercial use of
Yes.
tourist accommodation.
Which is defined separately as, resorts and tourist accommodations are defined separately.
Okay, so my main concern with removing private yacht clubs from the definition of resort is that we could end up with private yacht clubs operating and offering tourist accommodation and it not being managed. But are you assuring me that they are still going to be managed and
Yes,
zoned appropriately?
they are now being defined separately as private yacht club and as private club instead of being embedded within another definition. So yes.
Okay.
On receipt. Anything further? All those in favor? That's carried. And a motion, please.
I'll move B, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 577, being the Desolation Sound Rural Land Use Bylaw 1993, Amendment number 12, as attached to the October 2nd, 2024 report, be forwarded to the board for first and second reading.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. And number C.
I'll move that the committee recommend that the board authorize a public hearing to consider bylaw number 577, and that the public hearing be held at a date and time to be determined.
Second.
All those in favor? That's carried. And item number 2, electoral area D zoning amendment for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
All those in favor? Or do we got discussion? Something you want to talk
I
about?
just want to make a quick point for the public. I know that we're running out of time here. This was an application that the Area D's APC committee supported, so I'll be moving it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. On receipt, all those in favor? Anyone opposed? It's carried. And Director Rice, motion?
Move item B, that the notice, that as notice will be given in accordance with section 467-1 of the Local Government Act, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 580 be forwarded to the board for first, third readings and final adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor? That's carried. Number 3, bylaw 581, electoral area D wood debris removal service for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Discussion, Director Rice?
Yes, just one item that I wanted to get clarified before is that when I take a look at the bylaw itself, it talks about the disposal of the wood waste. Just clarity on that, is that going to go to just strictly a landfill or does that go for recycling?
Mr. Chairman, I think either.
Pardon me?
It could be either.
Okay.
Depending
Just
on
when I read the word disposal, it seems to be a little bit different. I think really we want to make sure that it's going to get recycled.
Well, part of the initiative, I believe, is to be able to provide wood chips for other community uses that are sanctioned, that are appropriate.
Yep.
Rather than have them all go into the landfill to be disposed of. So disposal, I think in this context means that the regional district would be able to use those for a variety of purposes.
Perfect. Just, again, is there any way of adding that little bit of clarity into the bylaw?
We could, I mean, but disposal is that, like, look, there's, none of these chips are going to the landfill, right?
Okay.
They're all going to be used things. So disposal is kind of a generic term of like, we're disposing them in a variety of manners.
Okay.
Like, so it covers all bases in my mind.
All right, well, I don't want to hold this up, so thank you for that clarity.
All right. On receipt then, all those in favor? That's carried. I just mentioned, by the way, if you have leftover, rather than throwing it in the dump, they're great fertilizer for the forest industry. All right, item B then, recommendation, Director Rice.
I'd like to move item B, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 581 being a bylaw to establish a wood debris removal service for electoral area D be given first and third readings, and that the approval for bylaw number 581 be obtained using the alternate approval process.
Right, that's the first 3 readings, 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? That is carried. Number 4, bylaw 582, Quad Island zoning amendment, Crescent Channel Enterprises for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, discussion. Director Mooney?
I have a question to staff. There's talk in this report about a conservation covenant on a large remainder of the land. Do we have any input into who holds the conservation covenant, or can we ask to be listed as a third party on the covenant? I understand that covenants with 3 parties are significantly more binding, and I would be great to include that somehow. If, looking to staff to see if they need a motion for that, or if it can be included in some way.
I guess through the chair. Sorry, John, your microphone's on. No, right now the Crescent Channel owners are working with a variety of organizations to hold that conservation covenant. It's not something that the SRD is typically a third party onto. Thank you.
Just because they aren't typically a third party, is it possible that they could be a third party?
Well, just think too, in terms of enforcement of covenants, like, or like, how are we going to do that? And if we are, they're gonna need, resources for that. Is that something that you're interested in?
I think I'm more thinking about, we had 2 covenant discharge applications recently here. And the reason that those came to the board was because there was only the proper.
On receipt?
Well,
No, go ahead.
well, no, I'm just thinking if the director wants to make, I mean, we certainly look into it if that's something you're interested in.
I can maybe advise the committee that in the past, this issue has arisen from time to time, and the reality is that these covenants, if the regional district is a party to them, does impose significant obligations on the part of the regional district to monitor what's going on and to possibly enforce the covenant. And in the past, we have not had the resources, in my understanding, to do that. So I think it is, as the CEO mentions, it's a consideration of what available resources would be able to devote to those kinds of covenant monitoring and enforcement.
I appreciate that, and we've had, I think we even had a delegation at one point that was concerned, or maybe it was a letter, that was concerned that there were covenants that the SRD was a party to in Area D, which were not being managed appropriately. And I don't have a concern with monitoring and enforcement, because I think that's probably why there is another agency or that's being involved. It just, for me, and from what I heard when I was at the Advisory Planning Commission meeting, was really they were concerned that if their SRD was an additional signatory, it would make discharging the covenant in the future more challenging. And that's really my sole intent in asking this question.
So one thing I'm uncertain about is if that's the intention, but what is our obligation? I personally would have to investigate that. So if you make yourself a covenant holder, yes, it gives you the ability to hold a hand in the air, let's say, if you want to discharge it, but what obligations come with it? Whether you want to, actually do something about that or not, what are you obligated as a covenant holder? I don't think we want to hold any obligations, but I'm happy to bring back a report on, let's say, the consequences or responsibilities of being a covenant holder on these for this and or future ones. Because if I come back and let's say a lawyer says, well, yeah, sure, you can put your name on these things, but these are all things you're obligated and responsible to, and that's going to turn into some kind of resource. Maybe you change your mind on that. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's not at times. I just don't know the obligations then that come with that.
Just as a point of clarification, in this particular case, the covenant currently exists and is being transferred with the land.
And does the SRD hold the covenant now? No, okay. Well, I don't want to hold up this application, but I am quite curious about that, and I imagine this is not going to be the last time that we have this conversation, so maybe I would make a subsequent motion about covenant report.
On receipt then, all those in favor? It's carried. Now, did you want to make a motion at this point, Director Mwini?
Well, should I move B first?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I would move that as notice will be given in accordance with Section 4671 of the Local Government Act, the committee recommend that bylaw number 582 Crescent Channel Enterprises be forwarded to the board for first 3 readings and adoption, and final adoption.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. Is there something else there?
I would move that staff prepare a report on the obligations, responsibilities, and consequences of Strathcona Regional District being a signatory to conservation covenants.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. And number 5, bylaw 583, area D, zoning amendment, Weeb, for receipt.
Like to move receipt?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's carried. Director Rice?
Like to move option B, that as notice will be given in accordance with, make sure that I'm reading the right one, with section 467, paragraph 1 of the Local Government Act, that the committee recommend that bylaw number 583 be forwarded to the board for the first 3 readings and final adoption.
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor? That is carried. Correspondence, Rising Tide Business Services for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Anything on that? All those in, yeah, did you have something on that?
I just wanted to note that the map in this letter shows the islands highlighted which this organization serves, and it only highlights Quadrante Cortez and none of the other Discovery Islands.
All righty. All those in favor of receipt? That's carried. All right, Director's Report, Transit Service, Electoral Area D, for receipt.
Move receipt?
Second.
Anything to speak to that?
Not too much. I think the report is quite clear, and it's just basically, I'm looking to put these in line for next year, so we'll just wait for the staff report to come back and make sure that we have appropriate budget.
Thank you. All those in favor of receipt? Carried. Number 2, evacuation routes, Electoral Area D.
Do you have a motion there? Yeah, there's a motion here, isn't there?
Did you have a motion?
Yeah.
There was a motion there, yes?
Yeah.
Go ahead and make it then.
So the motion is for staff to prepare a report on the feasibility of upgrading the bus stops at Shelter Bay Resort and at Ingalls Road Waterside to include concrete pads. Staff to also include costs for 2 more transit shelters, including installation.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? That's carried. Yeah, if you have a motion, let me know because I'm not opening each one of these. Okay, number 2, evacuation routes and Electoral D for receipt.
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. Anything on that?
Yes, again, this is just, again, the report is fairly straightforward. I do have a motion for staff to prepare a report for discussion at the EASC Committee on Emergency Preparedness Plans for Area D.
We'll get that in a second.
Okay.
All right, on the receipt then, all those in favor? And your subsequent, that's carried, subsequent motion, Director Rice.
For staff to prepare a report for discussion at EASC on the emergency preparedness plans for Area D, including evacuation routes should Highway 19A become unnavigable.
Thank you.
Second.
All those in favor? You got a comment?
I had a question, and that was, would that be something that, like our emergency and climate or emergency management people would be responsible for, or would that be something that would fall under the umbrella of Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure?
When I read it, it seems like it's something staff can prepare, I think.
On the receipt, all those in favor? It's carried, and the motion, Director Rice?
That was, we just voted on.
I think I already called it, didn't I?
Yeah.
There's no follow-up motion on
Okay,
that.
sorry. The motion is for staff to prepare a report on the feasibility of
Did we already?
sorry, that's not it.
That was the motion already.
Okay. All right, so we already did that one. I'm sorry.
You're getting me confused.
Yeah, got myself confused. All right.
3 now.
Number 3, pub to pub, Jack Hames Trail for receipt.
Move receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. And you got a motion on this?
I do, but I just want to make a comment for the public record, just so that the other directors know. This is one of the most popular trails that Area D has. The concern is that it covers a few different areas. So we start with Off Dog Leash, which is near the Oyster River. It goes over private lands where they allow, goose hunting in the fall. It's a legal hunt. And then it goes on to an area where dogs need to be on leash. So again, when I look at the signs, I think there's something that we could do better, and that's what I'm trying to get from staff.
Go ahead with your motion.
For staff, the motion is for staff to prepare a report for discussion at EASC on the matter of SRD signs for the pub to trail, also known as the Jack Hames Trail.
Second.
All those in favor? And that is carried. Number 4, Cortez Island Multi-Use Sports Courts for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
You want to discuss it?
Thank you, Chair. So this is a application or a project idea from the Southern Cortez Community Association to build 2 multi-use courts on their land beside the hall. There's strong community support for this, and if anybody's engaged with pickleballers, they know they're very organized and very keen. But this won't just be a pickleball court; it's also looking for basketball and tennis with the potential of a covered roof. And I do have a motion.
Thank you. Anything further?
I just want to ask, so provided, excuse me, the director some suggestion, we're working with the community group on land ownership and so on and so forth. With the new Community Works funding, if it's, you didn't care for that suggestion and we've got this in front of us, under this scenario, it's unlikely that Community Works funds will support that. They have a more stringent requirement for non-NGO funding for gas tax. Happy to bring the report back.
An NGO.
Non-government organization. They're more stringent for the requirements to allow for gas tax funding. So under a non-regional district ownership, in this format, it's unlikely that that's going to be supported through gas tax. I'm happy to bring a report back on it, but just want to set expectations. That's why when I suggested that we're working with the group to try and align that stuff and bring something forward that might be workable, I have low expectations of this format being successful.
Is this similar concerns when we brought funding to the Cortez Housing Society, another NGO?
Yes and no. It's just in terms of, what the gas tax intent is for, and then when it moves away from government organizations, it gets a little more challenging. And just reading what here is, I don't see this model. The project is eligible, but under this model, I'm just saying there's going to be a lot more challenges. But when I bring the report, I'll bring you options saying, however, if you want to entertain something else. So,
Okay, yeah,
I'm just trying to set
I don't think there's
expectations.
interest in having the land ownership change, which sounds like maybe your thinking might be the way to make it easier.
99-year lease.
Yeah. Anyways, I'm just saying it not to squash it, but just to set expectations.
I'll amend the
when it comes
motion
forward.
that I've got planned here then to incorporate that.
Okay, on receipt. All those in favor? That's carried. Motion.
Thank you, Edith. And I will amend this slightly if you don't mind working with me here, Edith. So I move that staff prepare a report for providing $50,000 in Cortez Island allocated community works funding for the building of the multi-use sports court on the Southern Cortez Community Association's property and bring it back to EASC for review. And before I amend that, Mr. Leach, do you think that's broad enough for you to include other the options that you're considering?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Thank you. If I could get a seconder.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Number 5, Cortez Island Land and Home Ownership for receipt.
Move receipt. All right, I need to
Second.
present the report first, don't I? No.
Move receipt first.
Okay.
Second.
Well, I guess first of all, we need your verbal report now that I read the actual thing.
Yeah.
Then we'll receive
Yeah.
it.
So basically, this is an idea that's been in the works for months, looking at providing affordable housing in Cortez. We know we need private sector building. We know we need rentals. And the other part of that is providing affordable land ownership. The Cortez Housing Society has a chunk of land, and rather than subdividing it into a lot of lots and trying to sell it into the free market, we want to provide services to that piece of land, power, water, and sewage, and then long-term lease it off to folks for an affordable price so that they can get a chunk of land for a really affordable price and build a house on it. And then if they want to sell it in 10 years from now, they can sell it for the price of what they put into the land, or the worth of what they put into the land, plus that long-term lease. So it locks in the land affordably into the long term. And I have a motion.
All right, let's get receipt of Director Vanessa's report.
Second. Move receipt.
Well, I can't move it, but you
Okay,
can
move
it.
receipt. Is that what we
Somebody
have
want
to
to
do?
second it? You can second it.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. Your motion, Director Vanessa?
I move that SRD staff work with the Cortez Housing Society to develop a plan for a short-term loan through the SRD Housing Service so that the Cortez Housing Society can develop a part of their land with power, water, septic, and a road to be sold through long-term lease agreements, creating affordable land opportunities on Cortez.
Second.
Discussion?
Just
in favor?
this is discussion. I just want to add, happy to, bring this motion report forward. I just want to remind everyone, we have a housing service and we have borrowing authority, but just as it's mid-October, it's going to be November, December financial planning. There's no requisition, let's say, approval. In approval, I mean internally, not externally. So if we want to action anything, and I'm just saying this, projecting your mind forward a couple months, we're going to need to requisition money for that housing service.
Is this out of the regional housing service?
Yeah, I'm
Oh, my
assuming.
goodness.
Yeah,
Well,
I guess I'm not looking.
We can't borrow
for-
money if we can't borrow money if we can't pay it back.
You can't work into the agreement. The Housing Society pays back the loan that they make, so there's no
But
cost.
we're the owner of the debt to start with.
Yeah.
Again, we have the authority to borrow money, but we have to have requisition money to pay that back, right? That's all fine. I'm just saying when it gets into financial planning, if we're going to move forward on anything in the housing service to borrow, we have to have requisition to pay that debt back. There will be a window that we will be accountable to pay debt back, even if it's short-term debt.
And you can't give that accountability to the Housing Society as part of the agreement?
No. So if we're borrowing the money, so just under this scenario, it's all fine. Just remember when we get into financial, so you borrow $2 million to do something, you tender it out, let's say you design tender it out. Immediately you're going to have your expenses because you got to pay the contractor while it's being built. We would typically incur short-term debt during that period. So we pay short-term debt, we finish building it, let's say it's $2 million, then we transfer that into long-term debt. We have to start making payments. Whether we make one payment, 2 or 10, we got to start making. There's going to be a window of time that we're making a contribution. So in order to do that, we have to have a requisition to make that payment back. So when we get into financial planning, just a heads up, if we're going to action anything in the housing service, we're going to have requisition to pay the debt back.
So you're saying this couldn't happen until April?
No, you cannot budget for a deficit, but you can incur debt.
Yeah.
And so let's say we spent money tomorrow on it. We're able to do that, but come 2025, we would have to budget for that debt and future money. It's all fine. I'm just saying, just remember that we have to collect some requisition action.
Okay. So a couple of points. One is, I'm really hoping this to be short-term debt, that the whole loan is paid back within 5 years as the leaseholds are.
Short-term debt would be short. When I say short-term debt, there's two forms of that. But short-term debt to us is while you're building something, you just pay off interest payments on that. And then once you're done and you know exactly the amount, what you're going to convert it to, you convert that into long-term debt. The term of that is variable, whatever we want. But short-term debt, immediately when you start incurring costs, you're going to have short-term debt.
Okay, so just so that everyone's aware, that the plan is to have that debt paid back within 5 years. And I really would love to see this project happen without a cost to taxpayers. And make this a project that's really just taking advantage of the SRD's access to cheap debt, and that the project pays for itself.
So there may be no net cost to, ideally, that's what we do. There's no net long-term debt to taxpayers, but short-term there would. We're going to have to, right? And so if the project is going to pay for itself, then just that short-term debt is included in all the debt that's being repaid. But they're 100% in anything we do. There's going to be some short-term money fronted, if you will, and then paid back. But there's no way of getting away from that.
Yeah, and I guess my initial thoughts was that the Housing Society front that cost.
I mean, it's our debt. We would have to secure it with requisition for sure.
Okay, so I'll keep the
Somebody's
motion.
going to reimburse the taxpayers for the requisition. Director Rice.
Just question for clarity. I thought this was a regional service, and of course, the requisition is for the entire region.
It is, but what I think Director Rice is doing is, for lack of a better term, making application to the board and saying, hey, we have a housing service, we have debt authority. Is this something that the regional board would entertain?
And that was the clarity that I was looking for. It looks like we're going to jump on this, and yet it still looks like it still needs, the regional board's approval.
It does.
Yeah.
All righty.
May I, Chair? I just wanted to say I was really excited to see this and think that maybe our regional housing service might be getting its first project. It's great, and I wonder if the report that staff brings back will identify these things that we've been discussing today about using the regional housing service and the sort of like the short-term versus long-term and the regional debt versus
Yeah, it's
fronting
gonna
debt.
have to, because
Okay.
if we're gonna forward anything, I'm gonna tell the board, you're gonna need to make a requisition request, or else we can't do anything.
Great.
How does that work? Okay, on the question, or on the motion, all those in favor? That's carried. Next, stepperoo, number 6, Cortez Island Advisory Planning Commission for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Anything there?
Yeah, I just want to thank the 28 people that applied to be on the Advisory Planning Commission for Cortez Island. And I have a couple of motions, one to nominate people to be members, and two to review the bylaw.
All right, on receipt then, all those in favor? That's carried. Director Vinesh, motion.
I move that the following people be appointed to members of the Cortez Islands Advisory Planning Commission: Romney Shipway, Bruce Ellingson, Amy Robertson, Kevin Pesey, Michael O'Donnell, Kai Harvey, Amy Bachner, Kate Madigan, and Elijah McKenty.
Second.
All those in favor? That's carried. Another motion?
And just a note to staff, I'll pass on the contact information, emails and stuff to get that forward moving. And then I have a motion that staff update the Cortez Island Advisory Planning Commission bylaw and bring it back to EASC for consideration.
Second.
All those in favor? Carried. Number 7, Village Bay Lake Telephone Service for receipt.
Move receipt.
Second.
Thank you, Chair. This report, if you had a chance to look at it, it comes from some concerns, and there's a letter attached here from some folks out at the Village Bay Lakes Family Water Recreation Society. And there's a lot of concern that the only payphone that existed and which really provided health and safety and ability for people to contact the outside world, the payphone has been removed by TELUS recently. And there's 75 cabins. There's a map here, which I included, which shows that the folks have these properties surrounded by a park, and it's in a very no cell service area. So I'm hoping that, well, as you can see, that I have a motion there that we can investigate other options and that we can communicate with TELUS to see if there's possible to reinstate the phone.
Director Rice?
Just the first thing that I thought of when I quickly read this last night was that I wonder if this is being driven by some of the changes through the North Island 911 service, particularly being that, the service is moving away from analog to digital. Here you have a payphone that is strictly analog. I'm wondering if that is something. So again, I'm just throwing it out there. It might be worthwhile for the SRD to write a letter to the North Island, so that we have it as a discussion item at the next North Island, just to get clarity, because this is the second time. So there was the payphone at Roberts Lake and now this one. And I'm just wondering, it just looks a little bit suspicious. Thank
Right, I
you.
believe Roberts Lake was restored, was it not?
Yeah, the thing with the Roberts Lake one, hadn't been taken down yet. It sounds like this one has. Again, I think it's good to bring it to 911 to see if it is an issue with them. I suspect these payphones are just a pain in the butt to TELUS and expensive to maintain. They're just doing away with them all.
Okay, on receipt, all those in favor? Carried, motion, Director Benny?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to move that communication with TELUS be undertaken to determine the potential of reinstating the important safety connection payphone at Village Bay Lake, and that options for providing a reliable phone connection from the Village Bay Lake area be reported to the Electoral Area Services Committee.
Second.
All those in favor? That's carried. New business.
One more.
Oh, old growth forest management, how about that? Director Mawini, motion for receipt, please.
Move receipt.
Second.
You got anything to say on this?
Well, Chair, hopefully you had a chance to read all 43 pages of my report.
Yes, very, very carefully.
Good. Well, I know forestry is very important to you, so I'm happy to hear that. This report stems from a recent Forest Practices Board report that was released. That's called Management of Old Forests on Quadra Island. And it really, there are some systemic issues in the Quadra Island forest management and landscape. And really, the landscape level planning is apparently what's needed. I will say that one thing the Forest Practices Board reports says in its conclusion is that no one in the provincial government considers it their responsibility to ensure recruitment strategies are in place where a deficit of old forests exists. And the province points to forest landscape plans as the solution. However, forest landscape planning will not solve the problem in the short term, as Quadra has not been included in either of the two new forest landscape plannings in the district. So I do have a motion, and I'm hoping that us bringing it to the board and communicating with the Ministry of Forests and the Chief Forester about these concerns will elevate the profile of the issue and get some action.
Okay, on receipt, all those in favor? That's carried. And a motion, Director Mawini?
Thank you, Chair. I would propose that the SRD Board write a letter to the Ministry of Forests, the Minister of Water, Lands and Natural Resource Stewardship, and BC's Chief Forester, highlighting concerns with old forest management on Quadra Island, the need for clarity on provincial responsibility for recruitment of old forests in landscape units with a deficit, and the immediate need for forest landscape planning on Quadra Island to ensure recruitment and retention of adequate mature forest to meet provincial targets.
Second.
All those in favor?
May I add one more thing? I just want to say that I think that really the 9% is what's supposed to be being preserved or recruited. And we know from the meetings that we've been at UBCM where we talk about fire resilience and things like that, that older mature forests often provide more protection around communities and really clear cuts don't. So I think there's a real climate resilience reason, as well as, of course, the water management and aquifer recharge that forests provide, especially when they have trees on them.
Okay. If you submit those motions to Edith, it's probably easier for staff to get it exactly correct.
Well, I did submit the whole report.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? That's carried.
Just a reminder on that too, we have a natural resources committee. If you want to refer something to that committee, just a reminder it's there too. Present.
Okay, so we need a motion. Well, we have no new business, so we're on addenda items. We need a motion to consider the addendums.
I move to consider the addendums.
And that'll be a second.
All those in favor?
Did we vote on my motion?
Yes, we did.
Okay, just making sure.
All those in favor of considering addendums? That's carried. Number 1, request financial assistance, Sayward Secret Santa Claus.
Move receipt of the report?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Carried. And a motion, please.
I'll move that the committee recommend that a grant and aid for the Sayward Secret Santa care of Village of Sayward in the amount of $500 to assist with providing 2024 Christmas hampers and gifts to Sayward families in need be paid from the Electoral Area A grant and aid budget.
Second.
Let me just also make one little comment here that several of the grants and aids that I do in Area A are done also equally by the Village of Sayward, but they do them several months later. So when those things come, I sit on them until I can confirm that the village is actually going to contribute, because the benefit is both to the village and to the valley. If I just go ahead and bring them to the board, who knows what the village will do? They might say, we're not interested this time, and I end up paying for the village. So another reason on my behalf. All right, on the motion, all those in favor? Anyone against? No, all that is carried. And number 2, financial assistance for Design School Parent Advisory Committee.
I'll move that the report from the CAO be received.
Second. Sorry, I was just putting my hand up
Yes.
for some reason.
You want to speak to it? No? Are you speaking to it?
Yeah, I do have a subsequent report, and maybe just like a process question. It seems like when I submit a report or something like this, my, the email, I'm just curious as to why there isn't a recommendation as well, or like what was different between the submission that Director.
We put a report on, can you pull it up? Like I signed.
Yeah, there's a report, but the B, recommend, be the committee.
Maybe just because we had the agenda produced.
No, I think, Mr. Chairman, what is being referred to is the staff report points out that there may be some issues with the board's policy, and so therefore has left it to the committee to decide whether or not they wish to support it.
Okie dokie, on receipt then, all those in favor?
So there's a couple options on here because this is in conflict with the policy about providing assistance to other forms of senior government on there, so.
That's carried. Could I
yes.
just ask a question here to staff? I have given grants and aids to the PAC.
We've given lots of grants to the Parent Advisory Councils.
Yeah, this is for equipment that's going in, in the school as we understand
Oh,
it.
I see.
It's going to be, used for a community multimedia classroom.
Yeah, I do field trips and extracurricular activity. A little different. All right.
It's going to be housed in the school, but it's going to be used by the community. So I would like to move that the committee recommend that a grant and aid for the Cortez Island School Parent Advisory Council to assist with the setup of a community accessible multimedia room on the property of the Cortez Island School be approved.
Do we need to say the amount?
Oh, yes, sorry. I changed the wrong one. I move that the committee recommend that a grant and aid for the Cortez Island Parent Advisory Council in the amount of $5,000 to assist with the setup of a community accessible multimedia room be paid from the Electoral Area B grant and aid budget.
Second.
So just for due process, you skipped on the school property part, which is fine, but when the report comes to the board, I think that's an important point to be made, so.
Yeah,
Just
I hear
'cause-
that. Yeah, I
yeah,
also
okay.
just want to make sure, this was a grant and aid that was denied in the last one because it was applied from the school. And I was told that it needs to
Yeah, I
come.
believe it was a generator for the school, right?
No, it was a multimedia classroom. It's a slightly adjusted project, but so
Anyway.
this is going to the Parent Advisory Council for it's a community, for a community asset that will be housed at the school.
Okie dokie, be up to the board, so brace yourself. All those in favor? That's carried. All right, let's move into close. Got a motion for that, please?
I'll move that the report from the CAO be received.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
And I will, oh, yeah, sorry. Did we all vote on that?
Yeah, all those in favor, gotta stick up your little hand. Okay, that's carried.
And I'll move that the meeting be closed to the public to consider matters deemed to fall within sections 90, paragraphs 1, B, E, I, N, and O of the Community Charter.
Number 2, where are you?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? That's carried. All right, let's go into close here. Get this thing wrapped up. Closed.